All right, every 4 years, right, Americans vote for president. But here's the thing. The person who gets the most votes across the country, they don't always win. And the reason for that is this. Well, this 230-year-old system called the Electoral College. So today, we're going to dive in and figure out what this thing is all about.
Okay, to really get what we're talking about, just look at these two maps from the 2016 election. On the left, you've got that map we all see on election night. A whole lot of red, right? It shows land area. But look at the map on the right. It's totally different. It's called a cartogram, and it's been reshaped based on political power, not just, square miles. Each little square there is one electoral vote. So the big question is, why is this funky-looking map the one that actually picks the president?
And that really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? How is the President of the United States actually elected? Because, spoiler alert, it is not a direct popular vote. It's more like a really high-stakes numbers game, and it's all played out state by state.
So how does this game work? Let's get into the nitty-gritty, the actual mechanics. And it all starts with one really important number.
538. That's the number. That is the total number of electoral votes up for grabs in the whole country. So the entire race for the presidency is just a mad dash to get a majority of these votes.
But where does 538 even come from? It's not just some random number they pulled out of a hat. Nope, it's tied directly to Congress. See, every state gets a number of electors that's equal to its members in the House of Representatives plus its 2 senators. So you've got 435 from the House, 100 from the Senate, and then the last 3, those are for Washington, D.C., thanks to the 23rd Amendment.
Okay, so out of those 538 votes, this is the magic number you always hear about on election night, 270. It's just a simple majority, that's it. The very first candidate to lock in 270 electoral votes, they win the presidency. End of story. It literally doesn't matter what the national vote count is. The whole thing is about hitting that 270 target.
So what even is this Electoral College? It's not a university you can apply to, I'll tell you that. The Constitution actually just defines it as this temporary group of people, and they're called electors, and their one and only job is to cast the official votes for president. So get this, when you go and cast your ballot, you're not technically voting directly for a candidate. You're actually voting for a list, a slate, of these electors who have promised to vote for that candidate.
And this is where all the campaign strategy really kicks in. It's all about how these electoral votes are handed out. In 48 states, plus D.C., it's a winner-take-all, free-for-all. I mean, if a candidate wins the popular vote in a state, even if it's just by one single vote, they get all of that state's electoral votes. Boom. The only exceptions are Maine and Nebraska. They do things a little differently, splitting up their votes by congressional district. But that's a pretty rare way of doing it.
But you gotta wonder, why? Why did they create this complicated system in the first place? Well, to get that, we need to hop in the time machine and go all the way back to 1787, to the Constitutional Convention. The founders, let's just say they were not on the same page about how to pick a president.
So, the Electoral College was basically this huge compromise. You had some founders who wanted Congress to just pick the president, but others were like, no way, that's just asking for corruption and backroom deals. A direct popular vote was also an option, but delegates from the smaller states freaked out, worried they'd just be completely ignored. And then you had James Madison, who was worried about what he called the mischiefs of faction. Basically, he wanted to stop a passionate, maybe even dangerous majority from just taking over everything.
Alexander Hamilton really put a fine point on it in the Federalist Papers. The whole idea was that these electors would be, smart, thoughtful guys who could make a wise choice. It was supposed to make sure the presidency went to someone with the, quote, requisite qualifications. It was basically a safety net to stop a popular but maybe totally unqualified person from getting the job.
Now the thing is, the founders were working off of a few key assumptions that, well, they don't look anything like our world today. They pretty much expected electors would be picked in their local districts and would actually use their own judgment. They had no idea that presidential and vice presidential candidates would start running together on a ticket. And, this is wild, they actually figured most elections would be so close that the House of Representatives would end up making the final call.
But that original plan, it started to fall apart almost right away. And it was all thanks to one thing the founders didn't really see coming: the rise of political parties.
Man, those first few elections were an absolute mess. In 1796, the winner, John Adams, ended up with his #1 political enemy, Thomas Jefferson, as his vice president. Can you imagine? Then, in 1800, it got even crazier. Jefferson tied with his own running mate, Aaron Burr, for president. It threw the whole thing to the House, where they had to vote 36 times to break the tie. This whole fiasco led straight to the 12th Amendment, which finally gave us separate votes for president and VP.
And that led to a game-changing shift. The states figured out that they could have way more power if they gave out their electors as one big winner-take-all prize. Just that one change totally transformed the role of electors. They went from being the independent thinkers Hamilton imagined to, as one historian put it, voluntary party lackeys who just vote for their party's person, no matter what.
You know, even the guy they call the father of the Constitution, James Madison, ended up hating this change. He wrote in 1823 that this whole winner-take-all thing was absolutely not what the framers had in mind. He said they were thinking of a system where votes were split up by district, kind of like how Maine and Nebraska still do it today.
So that brings us back to right now. How is this system, which has changed so much, actually working today? And why is it still one of the most hotly debated topics in all of American politics?
Well, a huge argument you hear today is that the Electoral College just isn't fair, that it goes against the whole idea of one person, one vote. And if you look at this chart, you can see why. The power of your individual vote is wildly different depending on what state you live in. A single vote in a small state like Wyoming carries way more mathematical weight than a vote in a massive state like California. And that imbalance is really at the center of the whole debate today.
Another thing that really worries people is the idea of a faithless elector. That's an elector who just decides to ignore how their state voted and picks someone else. I mean, what if an election is super close and just a couple of these electors go rogue and flip the result? A lot of states have laws to prevent this, but that fear that a handful of people could cancel out millions of votes, it's still out there.
In reality, though, is it a huge risk? History would say, probably not. Over 99% of all electors in U.S. history have voted exactly as they were supposed to. I mean, these people are usually picked because they're super loyal to their party. And yeah, a few have gone rogue over the years, but a faithless elector has never, not once, actually changed who won the presidency.
And so all of this leaves us with the big, lingering question. The Electoral College was a compromise made for a brand new nation way back in the 18th century. Is that same exact system still the right fit for the America we live in today? It's a really fundamental question, and how we answer it will absolutely continue to shape the future of American democracy.